Daily Bible Time. Good morning, it is Dominic, Steele. It's Monday morning, 9th of January. We're in chapter 10 of Christopher Watkin's Biblical Critical Theory, and we put out on the Pastor's Heart over the weekend an interview that I did with Chris Watkins, and I hope you'll go and engage with that, and that'll be helpful for you thinking through some of these issues. Now, chapter 10, we're only going to look at the first half. We have a super busy couple of days. Today at Village Church, tomorrow, and the next day we've got staff planning for the year, 3 days away. We're going over to St Michael's, Vaucluse, and they've got a lovely sunroom looking out over the harbour, and we're going to go and spend a couple of days there thinking. And then I've got a group tonight at church, and so, anyway, it's a big day. I've got to be out of the house by 7:45, and so I'm just going to do the first 6 pages of chapter 10, Abraham and Covenant. Now, I'll just read you the first couple of sentences. If God makes groundbreaking promises in Genesis 12, then in Genesis 15 he does something earth-shattering. He makes a covenant with Abraham. The remarkable events of chapter 15 are instigated by Abraham's uneasiness with his advancing age. Many years have passed since the promise of chapter 12, and Abraham and Sarai still have no child. So they go to God. 2 anxious questions on Abraham's part unleash an unprecedented and paradigm-shifting transformation in how we're to understand the relationship between the God of the Bible and human beings. It begins with God reaffirming his commitment, his promise to bless Abraham, and finishes with God making a covenant with him. This is Genesis 15. And what is remarkable about this promise and this passage is that the sovereign God should choose to bind and commit himself in the form of a covenant, tying his future actions to his promise. And as if this were not enough, he covenants himself to a creature, to a human being. Now, covenant is one of the major features of the Bible. It's important for us to understand what it is, what it isn't. The 20th century saw an important step forward in the study of biblical covenants. I'm just following Watkin with G. E. Mendenhall's argument that particularly the Mosaic covenant is modelled on ancient suzerain vassal treaties. A suzerain, a conquering dominant nation, would draw up a covenant with a vassal, a conquered submissive nation, and stipulate the commitments to which both sides were to adhere. Typically, the suzerain would provide military protection, and the vassal would promise allegiance and military aid if needed, along with tribute and taxes. Given this cultural background, the remarkable feature of Genesis 15 comes into climax in verse 17. Abraham does not walk between the animal pieces. Only God does so. His presence symbolized in the twin motifs of the smoking firepot and the flaming torch. And then in verse 18, only God is engaged. He covenants to give the land to Abraham's offspring, but no corresponding covenantal commitment is made by Abraham. Far from being an active participant in the covenant, Abraham's out cold. God binds himself to keep his thing, keep his side, but Abraham is not bound in that same way. As we saw with Noah, God relates to his people not according to the end shape, you perform and then I'll do it for you, the performance and reward, which would be the case if Abraham had walked between the animal pieces, but according to the U-shaped principle of grace and gift. Now, new heading, the social contract. The community of Israel in the Bible is founded on and held together by covenant. Time and again, God reiterates the covenant formula. I'll take you as my own people. I will be your God, Exodus 6:7. He rescues his people in the Exodus because of his covenant, Exodus 6:5. The law is given at Sinai in the context of his covenant action to rescue his people, Exodus 20 verse 1. He refrains from treating his people as their sins deserve because of his covenant, Leviticus 26:44. And he sends Christ in fulfillment of his covenant promises, Jeremiah 31. The covenant is the glue that holds God to his people and the people together. Now, what we see, though, in modern social contract theory is this pattern of covenant founding and sustaining a society. It's a model that's been adopted and adapted in modern social contract theory to provide a justification of political legitimacy. And Watkin takes us to two thinkers, Thomas Hobbes and his treatise Leviathan, 1651. He describes Hobbes as the Eeyore of social contract theory. He thought that individuals without the contract, Hobbes thought individuals without a social contract, were self-interested, violent, and in war against every man against every man, perpetual war, every man against his neighbour. And to avoid this state of unremitting threat and anxiety, Hobbes introduces the thought experiment, according to which individuals decide to hand over the sole power of life and death to a central despotic sovereign, a Leviathan, in the title of Hobbes's famous political treatise, in exchange for forfeiting their natural right to do whatever they want. The contractors receive security from Leviathan. Once the contract has been entered, there's no check on this Leviathan's power, no higher authority to which it must answer. Now, if Hobbes is Eeyore, then Rousseau is the Tigger to Hobbes's Eeyore. If Hobbes is wary of every man against every man, Rousseau proclaims in the opening line of his book, The Social Contract, he says, "You're in chains, the chains of modern urban life, where wealth and property are concentrated in the hands of a few and people are alienated from their natural liberty. And if individuals are pushed into Hobbes's contract because they're so afraid of the violent alternative, they are pulled into Rousseau's because of the positive vision for their common life and perfectibility. Hobbes's Leviathan offers the thin gruel of security. Rousseau's social contract is supposed to bring a banquet of freedom. Everyone can be free, because Rousseau contentiously argues every community has general will that reflects its true wishes." And so you've got Hobbes, war of all against all, and a contract provides security, and Rousseau, the idyllic state of nature, the contract brings freedom. Now, as Watkins points out, both these positions are reductive heresies of a more complex biblical reality. Hobbes's citizens seek security and renown through a tyrant. Rousseau's seek freedom through an enforceable general will. But the Bible diagonalizes these two options with the God who promises to Abraham, "I'll make your name great." He's a God who, while more powerful than Leviathan, loves those under his rule enough to die for them. And he's a God whose wisdom, while more fundamental than Rousseau's general will, comes not with a forced freedom, but a change of heart from stone to flesh. So, Watkins summarizes Hobbes and Rousseau have each grasped something of the complex biblical reality, but as with all heresies, they exaggerate